Okay, so we all knew really that daily videos for the whole month wasn't going to last. I'd have liked to have made it more than 8 days, but I'm surprised I did. I'm surprised I made it a week. Because as I say, I have tried vlogging before, and I think I made it about 3 days before I had to take a break. Anyway, completely irrelevant. Because I did miss yesterday, I am going to cover 2 subjects today. One of them is going to be a fairly short one, because it's surprisingly straightforward as mental health goes. The first thing I want to cover today is panic disorder, which I did mention in the first video, and if anyone doesn't remember and actually cares to, you might want to watch that video again to refresh yourself with what a panic attack is, but you probably don't need to. Anyway, panic disorder is where basically that can happen at literally any time. It doesn't even have to have a trigger for it, it just can happen. And as you can imagine, that does limit what you feel you're able to do, because you don't want that happening in public. That, I suppose, is when it becomes agoraphobia, when you fear for that happening in public. To me, personally, I've actually somewhat got used to that happening when I'm out and about, and I've kind of accepted that for the most part, people don't notice because they're all in their own world anyway. They've got their own tasks, their own things they're focusing on. They don't notice me having a panic attack at the side of the pavement or in the freezer aisle of a supermarket or wherever I happen to be at the time. And if they do notice, well, I've got bigger things to worry about at the time, so I try not to let that make it worse. But you can imagine that for someone who hasn't come to terms with panic attacks in public, that you don't want to go. I remember when I was early on in it, and I did not want anyone to see me like that. I'm still reluctant to let anyone see me like that, but I've accepted that sometimes it's going to happen. The reason I included it in the first video is because I don't want to whitewash what it's like. This is a month of awareness. I don't want to just say, right, okay, a panic attack is this, give a clinical description and done. No, I wanted it to be shown. I wanted it to be visible to anyone who doesn't know what it's like. When it started, as I say, I didn't want anyone to know, so I would often not go out anywhere for fear of it happening. And it still happens to me a couple of times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. I can sometimes go for a month without having a random panic attack, just the normal ones that I've come to expect anyway from various situations. It's still unpleasant, don't get me wrong. I don't like being seen like that, but it came to a choice basically where it was let that affect my daily life and never go out anywhere, or learn to live with it and just accept that it's going to happen. And when I rounded it down to that, it kind of became an obvious choice. Unfortunately for a lot of people, they end up erring on the other side of that. I mean, of course, there are still times that it does affect me, and on particularly bad days, there are still times when I won't go out because I'm worried about that sort of thing. One, as I mentioned in one of the other videos, where I needed to go out and do some shopping, and the anxiety was flaring up, and again, part of that is fear of the panic attacks, fear of the panic disorder, so that was a part of that. Eventually, as I say, I did muster up the courage to go and get done what I needed to do, but for some people, they can't do that. Some people are trapped inside their own home by fear of a panic attack. Unfortunately, there is no real solution to this. For some people, there's a root of their anxiety, they may be able to find that and deal with it, and that won't become so much of an issue for them. Some people like me learn to live with it and live around it as best we can, and others it ruins their life. There's no real conclusion to it other than that, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry if you were hoping for a happier conclusion to that one, but this is mental illness. There's not always and frequently not often a happy ending. Second thing I want to talk about today is social anxiety, and I know some of you have been waiting for this. Social anxiety is going to be a subjective one again, as these really all should be taken, because it is, again, one of the widest varying anxiety disorders. It affects almost every sufferer in different ways, albeit slightly different ways. But social anxiety, a lot of people think that it's a fear of interaction, or a fear of people, or a fear of society. It's not. It's not that. It's closer to a fear of consequences from coming into contact with those people. A fear that someone is going to think you're stupid for something you've said. A fear that someone is going to judge you just for you being there. A fear that you're going to call someone up at the wrong time and they're going to sever all ties with you. A fear of having a panic attack because you're worried about these things. It varies so wildly that it's hard to pin any of it down, really. Again, unfortunately, I can't guarantee that's accurate. I can only speak from my own experiences, really. The fear of interacting with people is actually more of a result than the disorder itself. Because you're afraid of what's going to happen if you interact, you fear the interaction itself. For me, the biggest way it manifests is phone calls. I find it nearly impossible to make a phone call. Even if it's someone who is expecting me, it could be a close friend who is expecting my call at a certain time, and that time comes and I find it extremely difficult to do. The anxiety levels rise to peak. The panic is strong in that situation. I usually manage to do it if it is someone I know. If I've got to call a stranger, then you can almost guarantee it's not going to happen, because I just can't bring myself to call. What if I call at the wrong time? What if I call the wrong person? What if they don't like what I've got to say? What if they track me down, find out where I live and set my house on fire? I know that's not going to happen, but it's the way that the mind runs away with thoughts like that, and the panic starts to rise, and I end up not doing it, or putting it off for another 10 minutes and another 10 minutes and another 10 minutes until it's 24 hours later and I can't do it because, hey, now it's too late. It is very similar with receiving calls as well. If someone calls me, I will feel the anxiety levels rising when I'm reaching for the answer button. And again, that's even if it's someone I know. The phone ringing on its own is enough to trigger at least a small anxiety attack in me. It may not be a full-blown panic attack, but the anxiety effects suddenly rise, and it affects me in much the same way. Of course, that's not the only way it does affect me. It affects me in many of the ways that other sufferers are affected by it as well. I am afraid to interact with people because what if I say something stupid? What if they disagree with me and punch me in the face? What if I'm wrong about something I say and they judge me for that? I know these all sound petty to someone who doesn't suffer from social anxiety, and that's one of the worst parts about it, is because you feel like you are being petty about it. I mean, you're not. I'm not. I know I'm not. It's a legitimate fear because of what it does to me. But that's part of my anxiety, is I worry that people look at me and go, he's worried of using a phone? What an idiot. How can you be afraid of using a phone? And that in and of itself doesn't help. One of the best ways that I can think to describe it is, imagine you're psychic. Imagine that you are psychic and you can hear the thoughts of everyone around you. You can hear them, you can pick them out individually, you can think, right, okay, that person is thinking that. That person is thinking that. That person is thinking that. Now imagine that you can only hear the negative thoughts that people are thinking. And they're all about you, and they're all coming all the time, and that is what it feels like. You look around and you think, right, that person is judging me for being too short, that person's judging me for having tattoos, that person doesn't like my hair, thinks it's too short, and you're just thinking, right, that person thinks that about me, that person thinks that about me, that they think that, they think that, they think that, and it all just keeps coming, flooding all the time when you're around people. And unfortunately, it's less so now, but this can affect you. It has affected me in that I pick up things in stuff that people say that aren't there. If someone says something, I will think that I hear a tone in it, a mocking or judgmental tone in it that isn't there. And my mind will suddenly start to run away. Is it something I said? Is it something I did? Is it something I am? Is it the way I look? And that just snowballs into full-on anxiety and panic attacks. Unfortunately, as I say, it's not just crowds as well. It's individual friends. I mean, anyone watching this, I'm not ashamed to admit here over the camera that I am constantly worrying that I've said something wrong around you. No, it's not that I'm constantly worrying, it's that I'm constantly convinced. I am certain that I've said something wrong around you, that I've said something that I should be supremely embarrassed about, or that I should have said something to you that I didn't. And on that note of individual interaction, it makes relationships extremely difficult, not just to be in, because if you are with someone, you are constantly worrying about what they're thinking about you. Are you being a good, proper boyfriend/girlfriend? Are you being a decent housemate if you've moved in with them? Are you a good husband or wife to them if you've managed to get that far? And it makes it extremely difficult to actually get comfortable with anyone that you are that close to. Although I have had a pretty messed up relationship and resultantly messy breakup in the past, which I may talk about someday, but that, I will admit, has almost certainly left me biased and more affected on those grounds. But even then, that's if you manage to get into a relationship with someone. If you have anxiety, especially social anxiety, just getting that far is almost impossible. There can be someone that you see almost every day, and you can be as close to them as any friend, and you can feel amazing things for this person. And it doesn't matter how good of friends you are, you will be completely unable to ask them, do you want to go out for a drink sometime? Or, you know, I really like you, do you maybe want to be my boyfriend or girlfriend, whichever they are. But because you're worried about the consequences of asking them, it's along the lines of, if you can imagine a flowchart, you know, asking someone out without anxiety. Did they say yes? Fantastic. No. Oh well, never mind. You switch that up with anxiety and it's, did they say yes? Yay! Next step. Wait, do you really mean that? Why did they say yes? Did they say yes because they felt sorry for you? Did they say yes because they were afraid of you? Did they say yes because they were afraid of being alone? And you can't enjoy it if they said yes. And you just end up worrying it over and quite possibly sabotaging it because of that. And then there's the flip side. Did they say no? And where you should think, never mind, it's, do you really mean that? And then you start to worry about, hang on, maybe I'm just covering how painful it is. And then you go over to, why did they say no? Is it because of something I did? Is it because of something I am? Is it because of the way I look? Am I really that stupid? Am I really that ugly? Do they hate me? And that's even if you get to the asking them out. Because you can see that person, you can think, right, okay, I need to tell you how I feel about you, but I can't because we're friends. And I like you, and if I ask you, then you'll say no, and then things will get weird between us, and we'll stop hanging out so much, and we'll just drift apart, and then I'll never get to see you again. These things are almost certainly not true, but you can't get over that. What if they say yes? What if they say no? What if an asteroid crashes down? And, I mean, obviously, again, unlikely, but your mind starts rolling, and these things become just runaway thoughts that you can't get over. When it comes to social anxiety, there can be treatments and therapies that can help. Most of it, again, is exposure therapy, but that's pretty much the case with all anxieties. You have to put yourself into these uncomfortable situations to get over them. I personally went through cognitive behaviour therapy to try and help me deal with my anxieties. They focus mostly on the OCD, which I will go into in another video, but that, for a while, did help. And I was able to go out without too much worry. I actually became able to use a phone to call people. I ended up applying for a job in a call centre, which I got because I felt I could handle it. Unfortunately, it was in the training for that job that one of the other trainees ended up thoughtlessly saying something stupid, and that I will go into in a later video, but that will probably be towards the end of the month when I feel ready to confront that and convey that and actually let that out there. It is something I've mentioned on Twitter in the past, but it's going to be a lot more difficult to say it out loud, even if it's to a camera. But because of what happened, I ended up taking a massive downward spiral. I tried everything I'd learned in cognitive behaviour therapy, and none of it worked anymore. I spiraled down into one of the deepest depressions I've ever been in. The anxiety came back full force and more, and I actually ended up basically having a nervous breakdown at that job because I had to work alongside the person who'd said what they did, doing a task which is one of the hardest things for me to do. And I became so depressed at that job that, as I say, I basically had a nervous breakdown. I lost that job because of it. If what had happened hadn't happened, I may well still have been in that job today. I would be a lot higher in the company than I am now, than I was at the start, and I wouldn't have nearly as many money worries as I do. But because of that, and the state it's left me in since, I've basically been in a dire situation for a long time because of it. Don't get me wrong, the therapies do work. They were working for me. Unfortunately, what happened affected me that badly that none of it's worked since. But there are so many success stories out there of people who have suffered from anxieties like mine and had the therapy and have become practically, quote-unquote, normal members of society. They've been able to go out and meet people, get into relationships, start new friendships, work their way up in their jobs, and lived happy, productive lives with the minimum of anxiety. So if you are in this situation, don't let it drag you down. Go to your doctor, say to your doctor, I feel like this, I need diagnosis and treatment. They will try pills. They will try therapy. They will send you to psychiatrists to see exactly to try and diagnose exactly what is wrong with you, find the best therapy for you, and give you treatment. And there is a good chance that that will work for you, so give it a go. Don't give up on anything straight away. Give it a chance. Other than that, as I say, the only real option you've got is to expose yourself to these situations and try to let it bother you less and less each time. I suppose that's one of the reasons I'm making these videos, is to get it out there, get my own feelings out there, get my own anxieties out there, confront them in my own way. And maybe if I help to raise some awareness and help just one other person, if I can help one other person with these videos, then it will have been worthwhile. If I can help myself with them, then hey, that's even better. But we'll have to see how that goes in later videos, won't we? Well, I've rambled on long enough and probably made a fool of myself quite a bit, so I'm going to leave it there, and hopefully see you guys again tomorrow. Bye, guys.